I will not touch the mic again. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Justin and Michelle for, yes. Certainly for all that they're doing today, and I in particular would like to thank them for the invitation to come share with you today. I also want to say thank you to all of you for being here so early on a Saturday morning. It's greatly appreciated. So I'm going to just ask us maybe to just take a moment. Let's breathe. Take in that we're here. And I wanted to say how much I appreciated the director of asking us to take a moment for those who have passed during the pandemic. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that we're all coming here in the midst of great uncertainty in our world, certainly in the midst of many dramatic changes. For example, I am sure during this book banning moment that there are books that are being banned that many of you might have read as young kids. I'm also sure that we're well aware that the Supreme Court has several cases that will impact us here for our adult learners and in higher education in particular. I know there might be some people here who also have family members who are really struggling with what is happening in the Ukraine. And so I want us to think about the fact that even in the midst of all of these challenges and that we're having in our society, what role can we still play in the work that we do with adult learners? So first I want to take you back and just say a little bit about who am I and why is this work important to me. So back in the, it's hard to believe, 1980s, 1990s, yes, woohoo, for all those 1980s, 1990s. Yeah, I love it. I see the hands, the clapping. I was a teacher in Oakland, California, and I have to say I came from a very small town in Pennsylvania, and in that small town, primarily the two populations were either white or black. So for me to come out to California and begin teaching in Oakland, I have to share with you that I hope you had a great social studies teacher. I did not. And so when I had students from Laos, Vietnam, El Salvador, countries in Central America, I really had not been exposed to many of those countries or the populations or the cultures of that country, of those countries. So you can imagine going into Oakland on my first day, my principal actually told me that he didn't think I was gonna make it in Oakland. And he told me because he said I was too nice. Yes, too nice. However, what he did not understand was I had grown up in a military family. Military families don't play. And my dad definitely taught me and understood very well what discipline meant, what being organized meant, what having goals meant. And so I think my principal was very surprised that I was there and I had students teach me so many things about their countries, about their cultures. And what I soon learned, though, was that my students didn't need me to just be a good teacher or the best teacher possible. They needed me to be an advocate. And this is professionally where I learned that I had to advocate for my students around equity and social justice. And in particular, my ESL students, the ESL students that I had a range of 1 through 5, those of you who taught in the 80s and 90s may remember we had levels 1 through 5. And even that highest level did not count in the University of California system for the English regular class. So I see some heads shaking, and we know what that means, is you've automatically have prevented our students from being eligible for one of the greatest UC college systems in this world. And so this is where collaboration came in for me. I learned to work with bilingual translators. I learned to work with community organizers. I learned to work with parents and families. I learned to work with fellow teachers to really think through how we change structures, practices, and policies to better benefit ESL students. But it was not only the ESL students that I learned a lot from, it was also the adult parents of many of these ESL students, because as many of you know, perhaps we're not paid as much as we could be paid as public school teachers. And so I also took on the responsibility of teaching adult learners in ESL programs during some of the summers that I was a public school teacher. And one of the things that was actually very fortunate for me was I had many of the parents of the students that I was teaching during the day. And so they too learned that Miss Knight didn't play. And so when their children would come home and say some things, they're like, no, 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 we know Miss Knight. She doesn't play. And what they taught me, though, was both the students, the ESL students, and their parents and as adult learners, was this notion not just of collaboration, but of solidarity. And solidarity across racial ethnic lines, solidarity across religious lines, solidarity across socioeconomic lines. How do we come together to really make learning better, not only for our K through 12 students, but for the adult learners that we have as well? And so as I think about the work that I have done since the 80s, believe it or not, has really focused on building more equitable school cultures at whatever level I'm teaching at, whatever level I'm engaging with. And so I think in the middle of your table, there's some orange paper and some pencils, and I'm going to ask you to take them. Okay. 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 Great. Looks like everyone might have their orange paper and a pen to work with. So one of the things you're going to learn about my pedagogy is that I'm always very interactive, whether I'm keynoting, whether I'm one-on-one, whether I'm with small groups, that it is very important that we engage together in the different activities around building culturally relevant school cultures. So hopefully today we'll get to 3 themes and we'll have 3 interactive activities. So the first interactive activity I want us to think about is who supported excellence within you? Who? Teacher, coach, family member, faith member, and what did it look like? Not just who supported it, but what did it look like? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Who supported excellence within you, and what did it look like? Be as specific as possible. Okay? So now I'm going to ask you just for about 1.5 minutes to turn to someone and share with them what you wrote about who supported you and what excellence looked like. So about 1.5 minutes, just share with someone at your table. Who supported you and what did excellence look like? Okay, we're going to reassemble. I know it's hard because we get talking. We're excited about what we want to share. Okay, I can definitely see that that person who supported excellence within you is right at the forefront of who you are. I'm going to ask you to come back. Come on back. And what I'm going to ask, do I have any volunteers who would like to share who supported them in terms of excellence? Who supported excellence within you? If you would like to share, do you mind raising your hand? And we have someone with a mic. Justin, in the back. I don't know.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone. So first of all, this team here supported me to share my story. So who supported me? First of all, I'm Leticia Barajas. I'm with East LA College, Go Huskies, with the LA Community College District. So who supported excellence within you? My father supported excellence within me. He was an immigrant with less than 6th grade education who never had an opportunity. With the recent comments, my father was very dark-skinned, and he experienced really colorism in the state where he was from in San Luis Potosí. So what he made sure my sister and I learned everything he learned as an adult. He said it wasn't a question of if we were going to succeed or if we were going to go to college. He set, since we were in kindergarten, super high expectations. And what it looked like was engagement, even though he didn't really understand English. And I went to Manchester Avenue Elementary, which was then 96% African American. He got involved in PTA. He got involved in talking to what the teachers were saying. So what my father taught me and what I teach my students is, number one, you are already pioneers. You are already gutsy. You moved to a new country, to a new land, and you did what a lot of people weren't. So you're risk takers. And so I think my opportunity in terms of having a role and learning from my father is that high expectations, keeping that positive focus, integrate. You never know who's listening or when they're listening, and always being uplifting. And it's not about when, it's not about that you haven't done it or you failed. It's like, it's not yet, like the growth mindset we're learning. So that was it.
Thank you. Do we have at least one other person who might like to share who supported excellence within them? Justin.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. So I thought my father is a great role model for me, too. And, my father. And he made me so strong right now. And he showed me how impossible can be possible, even though there is no resources available. He showed me how to be brave while the situation is not good enough. And then at the beginning, I really didn't understand this, but now by asking this question, the more I dig into the question, I understood, oh, wait a second, it was my dad. And I was looking for a professor, for a mentor. I said, no, dad as being my role model. Thank you so much for providing such a great question and thinking of this profound question. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we had a couple of fathers. How many people might have said their mothers? If you said your mothers, raise your hand. Okay, a lot of mothers. How many people might have said a grandparent? Any grandparents? A couple of grandparents, okay. I see some grandparents. How many people might have said a coach? Did anyone say a coach? Okay, we had a couple of coaches over here. Did anyone say like a member of their faith community? A couple people, okay. Is there anyone I'm forgetting? Oh my goodness, how could I forget the teacher? Yes, absolutely, the teacher. Woohoo, okay, lots of teachers. And what I wanted to also share by asking this inquiry question is this understanding in building school cultures, how everyone can play a role. So yes, the teacher, but we have many parents, as we can see, who played a role, and grandparents, family members, people outside of our family as well in terms of coaches or faith members. We want to think about if you have an administrative role or a support personnel role. What role can you continue to play to support excellence within our adult learners? And so I too just briefly want to share in terms of excellence. I really appreciated what you shared, because when people always say, who supported excellence within you, it did start with my family. I want to start with my father, who's in the middle, who's kind of in the military uniform. My mom, back in the 1950s, it was illegal for both of them to get married. They showed me by example how you have to challenge injustices. But most of all, one of the aspects of education that my father really supported excellence within was, that dreaded Algebra 1 class. We all know if you don't make it past Algebra 1, your chances of going on to 2-year, 4-year college are really slim. Unless, of course, you have other opportunities along the way that do come. But in terms of immediately having access, if you don't do well in Algebra 1, it starts to put you on a trajectory that does not see you in excellence. And I did not do well in Algebra 1 one semester. But my father went up to the school, and similar to both of what you're sharing, my father had not graduated from high school. However, he did receive his GED. And he went up and asked the teacher why I was not doing well in Algebra 1. I have to tell you, I think the teacher was quaking in his boots. He was very afraid, because my father was demanding that I be taught well and taught well in an Algebra 1 class. But my father and my mom could not help me at home, and so they directed them to the district office. And at the district office, they gave, back then, a stack of like 20 books, workbooks, to get you through Algebra 1. And every night, I would have to go home and work through those workbooks. But I still attributed to my father going up to that school, going to the district office, getting the support that I needed to teach me that I could do well in algebra, and to teach me what excellence really means, even if you think you don't have the resources available. So as we continue to think about excellence and the idea of high expectations coming forward, what does that look like for our adult learners? So we want to talk about our expectations, our beliefs, our values, and norms of learning. Who do we think can learn? And what does learning really look like for our adult learners? The second theme I want us to think about is being color brave. Does anyone know who Melanie Hobson is? We have one person over here, 2 people. Okay, is the mic near any one of them? I don't think so. The roving mic, I don't see Justin. Okay, so not only is the person at the table who raised her hand first, yes. Who is Melanie Hobson?
Hi, good morning. Vita Hill, Los Angeles City College. Melody Hobson is a financial guru. You can find her on Good Morning America. She's also married to George Lucas, and they have a young child. Just very instrumental in the community.
Thank you. A financial guru, I love how you say that. Absolutely. And because I recently moved from New York to Denver, she is one of the new owners of the Denver Broncos. Amazing, right? Yes, that is like great news to hear. You might not be for the Denver Broncos, but I am certainly happy to see a woman of color being able to be a financial partner of one of the major NFL teams. So I want to just play a small snippet of what she says about how important it is for us to be color brave as we think about careers, as we think about our roles that we can support our students in thinking about different careers. Uh-oh. Okay.
So it's 2006. My friend Harold Ford calls me. He's running for US Senate in Tennessee. And he says, Melody, I desperately need some national press. Do you have any ideas? So I had an idea. I called a friend who was in New York at one of the most successful media companies in the world, and she said, why don't we host an editorial board lunch for Harold? You come with him. Harold and I arrive in New York. We are in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies. And we get to the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. She motions for us to follow her. We walk through a series of corridors, and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a stark room, at which point she looks at us and she says, where are your uniforms? Just as this happens, my friend rushes in. The blood drains from her face. There are literally no words, right? And I look at her and I say, now, don't you think we need more than one black person in the US Senate? Now, Harold and I, we still laugh about that story. And in many ways, the moment caught me off guard. But deep, deep down inside, I actually wasn't surprised. And I wasn't surprised because of something my mother taught me about 30 years before. You see, my mother was ruthlessly realistic. I remember one day coming home from a birthday party where I was the only black kid invited. And instead of asking me the normal motherly questions like, did you have fun or how was the cake? My mother looked at me and she said, how did they treat you? I was 7. I did not understand. I mean, why would anyone treat me differently? But she knew. And she looked me right in the eye and she said, they will not always treat you well. Now, race is one of those topics in America that makes people extraordinarily uncomfortable. You bring it up at a dinner party or in a workplace environment, it is literally the conversational equivalent of touching the third rail. There is shock, followed by a long silence. And even coming here today, I told some friends and colleagues that I planned to talk about race, and they warned me. They told me, don't do it. There'd be huge risks in me talking about this topic, that people might think I'm a militant black woman and I would ruin my career. And I have to tell you, I actually for a moment was a bit afraid. Then I realized the first step to solving any problem is to not hide from it. And the first step to any form of action is awareness. And so I decided to actually talk about race. And I decided that if I came here and shared with you some of my experiences, then maybe we could all be a little less anxious and a little more bold in our conversations about race. Now, I know there are people out there who will say that the election of Barack Obama meant that it was the end of racial discrimination for all eternity, right? But I work in the investment business, and we have a saying, the numbers do not lie. And here, there are significant, quantifiable racial disparities that cannot be ignored in household wealth, household income, job opportunities, healthcare. One example from corporate America. Even though white men make up just 30% of the US population, they hold 70% of all corporate board seats. Of this Fortune 250, there are only 7 CEOs that are minorities. And of the thousands of publicly traded companies today, thousands, only 2 are chaired by black women. And you're looking at one of them, the same one who not too long ago was nearly mistaken for kitchen help. So that is a fact. Now, I have this thought experience that I play with myself, experiment, when I say, imagine if I walked you into a room and it was of a major corporation like ExxonMobil, and every single person around the boardroom were black, you would think that were weird. But if I walked you into a Fortune 500 company and every around the table is a white male, when will it be that we think that's weird too? And I know how we got here. I know how we got here. You know, there was institutionalized and one time legalized discrimination in our country. There's no question about it. But I still, as I sort of grapple with this issue, my mother's question hangs in the air for me. How did they treat you? No, I do not raise this issue to complain or in any way elicit any kind of sympathy, I have succeeded in my life beyond my wildest expectations. And I've been treated well by people of all races more often than I have not. I tell the uniform story because it happened. I cite those statistics around corporate board diversity because they are real. And I stand here today talking about this issue of racial discrimination because I believe it threatens to rob another generation of all the opportunities that all of us want for all of our children, no matter what their color or where they come from. And I think it also threatens to hold back businesses. You see, researchers have coined this term color blindness to describe a learned behavior where we pretend that we don't notice race. If you happen to be surrounded by a bunch of people who look like you, that's purely accidental. Now, color blindness, in my view, doesn't mean that there's no racial discrimination and there's fairness. It doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't ensure it. In my view, color blindness is very dangerous because it means we're ignoring the problem. There was a corporate study that said that instead of avoiding race, the really smart corporations actually deal with it head on. They actually recognize that embracing diversity means recognizing all races, including the majority one. But I'll be the first one to tell you, this subject matter can be hard, awkward, uncomfortable, but that's kind of the point. In the spirit of debunking racial stereotypes, the one that black people don't like to swim, I'm going to tell you how much I love to swim. I love to swim so much that as an adult, I swim with a coach. And one day my coach had me do a drill where I had to swim to one end of a 25-meter pool without taking a breath. And every single time I failed, I had to start over. And I failed a lot. By the end, I got it, but I got out of the pool, I was exasperated and tired and annoyed. And I said, why are we doing breath-holding exercises? And my coach looked at me and he said, Melody, that was not a breath-holding exercise. That drill was to make you comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how most of us spend our days. If we can learn to deal with our discomfort and just relax into it, we'll have a better life. So I think it's time for us to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation about race. Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, all of us. If we truly believe in equal rights and equal opportunity in America, I think we have to have real conversations about this issue. We cannot afford to be colorblind. We have to be color brave. We have to be willing, as teachers and parents and entrepreneurs and scientists, we have to be willing to have proactive conversations about race with honesty and understanding and courage. Not because it's the right thing.
Okay, I am. Thank you. So I do have to say, when I came into this room today, when she talks about we need all the diversity that we have, I looked in this room and I have to say how encouraged I was by all of you who are working to really support our adult learners. And that needs the diversity of all of us for them to have the lives that we're hoping that through education that they might have a better quality of life, that we all might have a better quality of life as we learn to have these hard, difficult conversations. And, you know, I was recently trying to find out what was happening here in Los Angeles and really seeing once again the reasons why solidarity is so important and that we're not divided along racial lines as we think about the inequalities that are taking place for many of us, many of our families, many of our communities. And so we do have to be comfortable with asking the hard questions. So the hard question that I do want to ask us to think about as part of our second theme is, how can we as educators, but not only educators, administrators who are in this room, community college personnel who are in this room, support personnel in this room, whoever and whatever role you have in this room, how do we challenge simplistic, singular notions of culturally and linguistically diverse adult learners? And we're thinking about that range of 16 to 80 that I think Justin and Michelle were telling me are part of this consortium. And so Pedro Noguera at the University of Southern California says, it's how we frame the problem, how we can get to a different solution. So I want us to think about mapping asset-based versus deficit-based understandings of adult education learners. And so when we think about adult education learners, and specifically I want to think about ESL learners, and then I'm going to ask you to think about another group at your table. But as I share out this list of trying to debunk deficit-based understandings, I just want you to write down how many of these, you can just say 1, 2, 3, 4, have you heard about the adult learners that you work with? How many of this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Of the 5, how many of you heard about the adult learners that you work with? Okay. Raise your hand if you've heard 1. Raise your hand if you've heard 2. Raise your hand if you've heard 3. Raise your hand if you've heard 4. And has anyone heard all 5? Okay. So, if we frame the problem as our adult learners are deficit in their ways of thinking and being as learners, it leads us to different ways to solve the problem or to think about the problem or to think about who they are. So we want to think about if we come from a more strengths-based understanding of who they are. And sometimes when I think about strengths-based or asset-based, sometimes they're invisible, that maybe you have seen working with them, but others may not know about. So when we think about the fact of maybe some of our learners have been deemed lazy and unmotivated, what happens if we think about the person actually potentially already knowing the material? And so therefore, I don't know about you, but to be honest, when I'm in places where I'm not being challenged, I could probably appear unmotivated as well. And so I want us to think about how words and how concepts about adult learners play out in the ways we might then educate. So what happens if we say the student is always hard or that student is tough? I have them slightly out of order, so I'm going to go down to, he needs trusting relationships to open up. What happens if we think differently, that that person can't be reached because they're hard or tough, versus if we're building trusting relationships with people, with adult learners, how does that enable people to open up differently? This one is always very interesting to me when used with ESL learners, to be honest with you, because it comes from a broken family or a broken home. Over 50% of the homes in America are not together. And so when we label that for one particular group and seem to mean that that person can no longer be educated, how do we think instead that they come from a very supportive extended family? Consumed by technology. That is one I know we hear a lot today. But what happens if we think about that person having great tech skills, very tech savvy? We're in a different world today. I mean, since COVID, being able to be tech savvy has, I think, upped all of our games in terms of like being in a Zoom room, knowing how to raise your hand in the Zoom room, knowing how to show the different emojis in the Zoom room. It is just amazing to me. And then I think about what does that mean when, if we're talking about a tech-savvy adult learner, and are our assignments tech-savvy assignments? So I have to say in teaching adult learners, I've had to change my assignments. I can no longer just say, even though I've asked you to write on paper and pencil, I have had people now hand in TikTok as their final assignment. I can't do a TikTok for my life, to be honest with you right now. I need really a lot of time to help someone do a TikTok with me. YouTube videos, artistic renderings. There are so many other ways of showing knowledge, as I'm sure you're well aware, but I do wonder, is that translating in the way that we're educating today, and what we accept as knowledge today? and what we allow our adult learners to produce as knowledge in our classrooms. So what I'm going to ask you for inquiry number 2 is at your table, I want you to choose a group, whether it's Latinx immigrants, whether it's black males, maybe Asian girls, maybe adult education learners with disabilities, but I want you to choose a group that you want to work with or that you do work with, and I want you to go back to what are some of the deficit-based understandings that you think people have of that group, and then what are some of the invisible strengths or assets that you know that this adult learning group has? I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, maybe 4. Let's take 4. Okay? Choose a group at your table that you work with, that you want to think about how they're perceived in terms of deficit, but then how you might perceive them in terms of their strengths and their assets. So it'll take about 4 minutes. I'm watching the time because we're moving right along quickly. Okay, we're going to reassemble. I know it's always a little hard to come back. I'm going to ask you to reassemble and to see if we have 1 or 2 tables that might volunteer to share out some of their thoughts. Do we have a table that would like to volunteer? Okay, we're going to move on. Ooh, sorry. We are going to move on if we don't have at least 1 table that wants to volunteer. Oh, we do have a table, okay? Yes, absolutely, thank you.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We are a table from colleagues from LA City College, and thank you. And the group we wanted to talk about, we had a few groups, but we wanted to talk about our older students, our seniors, veteran students, senior students, and when we were talking, we started talking about like there's often a misconception about them being fixed mindset, low with technologies, low learning, and when we started talking about asset-based, we talked about like how much resiliency they have, how brave they are to step into our schools, which are often thought about places for young, and how education has no age, and also what they bring into the classroom, that those leadership skills they have in our classes, that lived experience that brings context to our lessons. So that was the group we talked about. Did I miss anything, group? Capable, just how much capacity and capabilities they have, as well as their resiliency.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Okay, hopefully you had some great conversations at your table about adult learners, a group of adult learners, and how we can challenge simplistic notions of our adult learners and what they are capable of. The third area, and the last area that I want to just share briefly with you today, is around college talk and clear expectations. And so part of the clear expectations that I do want to share is that I'm always about options for our learners and for them to make the choice of what they want to do. And so I believe it was your school board member who talked about the trades at the community colleges, different options that people might take up in terms of the military as well. And I always want to share how important it is, even as people think about the options for our students, I always want to think about which options are the default options for our students and which options are not. And so as we think about college talk and clear expectations and building that school culture around college talk, I just want to read the definition that Patricia McDonough, one of the leading scholars of college access at the University of California, Los Angeles, has defined. A college culture requires clear, ongoing verbal and nonverbal communications with students about what it takes to get to college, so that they understand what is required and expected of them if they want to stay on a college path. Faculty and administrators share their own experiences and discover their own assumptions about their roles in preparing students for college. Through this college talk, a college culture becomes clearer and the college preparation process becomes more effective. And then as we think about the clear expectations that we have, do we have expectations that all our students are prepared for a full range of post-secondary options? And the explicit goals of this preparation must be clearly defined, communicated, and a part of the daily culture of the school, such that students, family, teachers, administrators, and staff recognize the role that each plays in preparing students for college. And I already shared earlier one of the reasons why college access was important to me with the ESL students I taught in Oakland, and the dreams and hopes that their parents had for them when they wanted them to go on to college. But a college talk and clear expectations were not present in the school culture. And so I think about who, from the very beginning, someone was sharing in the back that from, a young age, the father was sharing with her about college and the clear expectations that the family had that she would attend college. But we want to think about in your culture that you have for adult learners, what messages do you think the adult learners that you work with, that you teach, receive, both positive and negative, about their ability and their potential to go to college? Okay? Do they receive both positive and negative messages about going to college? And from whom? And when we think about your own experiences in terms of college talk and clear expectations, I want you to think about what was in place and what wasn't in place. And as we think about the structures, the practices, the policies, people always think it takes money. But I always think about college talk as one of those practices that does not take money. It's something we can all do. And I come from the perspective that what is it that we all can play a role in supporting our learners? And so I want you to think about, just for a moment, inquiry number 3. This is your final inquiry, given that we only have a couple minutes left. And I just want you to think about, what was the last conversation, what was the last conversation you had with an adult learner about going on to college? Just think about that conversation. Just write down some bullet points. What was the last conversation you had with an adult learner about going on to college? Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay. 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 So we only have about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to just fast forward a little bit. And I just want you to continue to think about, are you having conversations about college? From whatever role that you have, Whether you've been to college, whether you're bringing speakers in to think about college with your adult learners, what practices can you put in place? And so I'm just going to put a plug in for the book that's on your table. In Classroom Cultures, in every chapter, there is a section on how you can think about setting up policies and practices that support students to think about college. So I want to thank all of you today. It's been great. It's been wonderful. I really appreciate your enthusiasm for the work you're doing. And I may see some of you a little bit later. So thank you.